Hello, it's just me today to talk about fTPMs and a few other things. The fTPM is the first story here. There's a academic research paper titled Fall TPM, Exposing AMD's fTPM's Deepest Secrets. And this is important as an attack on BitLocker drive encryption used by Windows machines. And Windows 11 makes a TPM, a trusted platform module, mandatory. Now, the old system which is still used on high-end systems, has a discrete TPM, which means you have a processor and you have a second chip called the trusted platform module, which handles the cryptography. And that is so that the cryptographic secrets are protected from malware and other attacks. The processor can reach main memory and the hard drive and the input and output devices, but it cannot reach the secrets. The secrets are hidden inside another chip, and they are not present anywhere in the address space of the main processor, so no possible attack on the main processor could steal the secrets from the secret chip. And that makes hard drive encryption much safer. However, it turns out that the discrete TPMs, which are a separate chip on the motherboard, are vulnerable to a type of attack where you get physical access to the computer and you reach in and monitor the bus wires that connect the main processor to the trusted platform module. And then you monitor the signals going by there. And there are various attacks that attempt to find the key that way. So there's another kind of TPM, which is apparently far more common these days. I didn't know that before reading this paper. And that is a firmware TPM, which is not a separate chip. It's in the firmware of the computer somewhere, and that was perhaps considered more secure for that reason. At least it's immune to those attacks that involve directly accessing the bus. But in this paper, they develop a new class of attacks against the firmware TPMs, and they can defeat BitLocker entirely with 2 to 3 hours of physical access to the target device. So the end result of this paper is they say a trusted platform module and PIN strategy for full disk encryption is less secure than simply using a reasonable passphrase and no TPM at all. So this seems like a pretty serious flaw. I guess we'll have to have yet another version of TPMs to address this. However, in practice, well, I wonder what this means. I mean, if you encrypt your hard drive with BitLocker, the main threat model for encrypting a hard drive is physical theft of the laptop. Because if you have the thing booted up and you're connected to the internet, an online attack would have access to all the decrypted data anyway, because it got to be decrypted while the machine is on. So realistically, this physical access attack is in fact what BitLocker was supposed to prevent. And this makes it sound like it fails to provide that protection to a large extent. There is an amazing article, which I'm going to share with an image about here. Let me do that. Yeah. All right. This article here, DFR Lab, goes through statistics to analyze what happened when Elon Musk changed the policy of Twitter around state-sponsored platforms. And I watched this happen. What happened is Elon Musk has very much been red-pilled. He's totally buying into the far-right radical belief. And as you may have heard, one of the many beliefs they have is that there is no reliable news anywhere, that all news agencies are corrupt, all governments are corrupt, and so on. So his belief is that an agency, a news outlet like NPR, which is funded by the viewers with a small amount from the government, with strict editorial isolation, so that the government does not influence the press coverage there. He says NPR is a state-sponsored entity. And so is, I think he accused another one, like maybe CNN, of being state-sponsored. I'm not sure. And therefore, it's exactly the same as Russia Today and Iranian state media and North Korea media, and all this sort of thing. He regards all governments as corrupt and all news sources as equally corrupt. So he removed Twitter's protection, which had been stopping the major sources of disinformation from being amplified. And this is what he promised when he bought Twitter. He was going to get rid of the shadow banning of conservative accounts. And what that means is that you have to let everything through, which is also what he said. He believes in free speech where everybody can just say everything, and you don't have any more content moderation. He also said, however, that he wouldn't let it turn into a hellscape of spam and abuse, but that is in fact what he did. So you can see the result. There was a change in the official policy of Twitter around April and May, and March and April. And so you can see right here, here's the Russian accounts. The Russian main state media account is RT Arabic, and you can see when he changed it on March 28, a sudden spike of engagement in that account, and the main RT America account, RT.com, and other Russian accounts. And then the Chinese state media accounts also had a spike in engagement at that time. And the Iranian state media showed a big spike in engagement at that time. So Elon Musk has done something that he said he would not do, which is just unleash a sort of toxic hellscape of disinformation on Twitter. And another thing that happened is that there's been a bunch of verified blue check accounts that have been spreading disinformation about a nuclear strike from Russia. A few days ago, the Kremlin announced that there was a drone attack on the Kremlin, an attempt to assassinate Putin, and all the reputable news sources I hear say this is probably a false flag operation by Russia, so they'll have something to hopefully stir up hatred against Zelensky. It doesn't seem realistic at all that it's a real Zelensky plot, but the Russian propaganda people are blaming it on America and on Ukraine, and the blue check Twitter accounts are now saying that Russia wants to now launch a nuclear strike against Ukraine, and scaring up, pushing this very scary narrative, which is almost certainly disinformation, and demonstrates another thing, which Elon Musk did. He removed all the blue check marks, which used to verify that people were authentic, and turned them into just something you buy to ornament yourself, again showing his contempt for authority and accuracy. He seems to think that all sources of news are identical, just a random troll, a disinformation account from a hostile government, and CNN and the New York Times. He thinks they're all equal, and we should remove any indication that one is better than another. That's his idea of promoting truth, which has driven everybody off Twitter, including me. I don't know very many people still on Twitter. Even the few people that stuck with Twitter, they seem to be going to blue sky now. So I think Musk seems to have burned down Twitter entirely. Anyway, there's another article I thought was very interesting on the Kyiv Independent, which explains what's going on in Russia. One of my students asked a very good question. He said, how can they have so many casualties in Ukraine that we're hearing about in the news, and yet they don't have to conscript more soldiers from Russia? And this is part of the answer. The Wagner Group is the main one, but it turns out there are dozens of these private military contractors. They call them private military companies. They're illegal in Russia, and this is what the soldiers are now. What they're doing is, instead of having another push to draft people into the Russian army to send them to Ukraine, many oligarchs and companies like Gazprom and all kinds of agencies in Russia are just raising private armies by recruiting people with offers of high pay and getting people from prisons. They're just throwing together armies and then throwing them to Ukraine. And this gives them favored status with Putin because he appreciates it. And they also get to tack into government money and get rich doing this. So it reminds me sort of the medieval times where you had little princes everywhere, and each little prince would raise a little army and then donate it to the king's forces in return for the favor of the king. So it's sort of disorganized. And I was thinking this is ridiculous and out of date. And then I think, the same thing happens in America to a large extent. We have these military contractor groups like the one run by Eric Prince, Blackwater, and others. An increasing amount of American military operations are, in fact, private military contractors that are little more than mercenaries. And it's a similar kind of situation here. I think it's a pretty bad thing in both cases. There's one of the famous quote that says I think it's from Abraham Lincoln. He said, any nation that will not fight to defend itself will not long survive. If we don't have soldiers that are real soldiers from the government defending us, and instead we have mercenaries, that's a very unstable, very bad situation. But I think that's where we are. Anyway, that's all I had to show you today. And I'll have another one of these on Tuesday.